Oh yes, baby. It's time for another edition of Overrated, Underrated, Properly Rated. Let's begin. Andrew Bailey. Anquan Boldin, one of the more underrated wide receivers of the 2000s that never got the attention he deserved throughout his career. Well, he was a very good wide receiver for a very long time and excellent when it came to contested catches, which is a huge reason why Flacco had that monster Super Bowl run in 2012. And also because of Raheem Moore, but whatever. Boldin was never dominant, so he falls short of the Hall of Fame in my case, but I don't see a lot of people say he's a Hall of Famer anyway. So my verdict, properly rated. Bruce Wayne. Barry, my grandma has been diagnosed with bone and lung cancer, and your videos are helping me tremendously. Well, that means a lot, and I hope your grandma is doing well and able to pull through, and I'm glad that I could help in some small way. So thank you. The player I was curious of your opinion was Marshawn Lynch. In his prime, he was a freak of nature, but his prime was so short, I feel like he is somewhat underrated. Well, Lynch was similar to Boldin in that they were both physical beasts. They had some great seasons, they won a ring, but probably fall just shy of making the Hall of Fame. Maybe Lynch will get in eventually for his playoff career, but I'm not sure. At this point, he's more known for his off-field personality than anything he did on the field anyway. Verdict, just here so I don't get fined. Typhonic. Randall Cobb is one of Aaron Rodgers' most reliable targets and was very productive throughout his career. Would love to hear your thoughts on him. Well, he was a solid slot receiver who had one really good season in 2014 and never came close to matching that again. He was also a very good kick returner early in his career. Overall, though, he might be just a tick overrated. He's mostly been a number 3 receiver and sometimes a number 2 receiver, no offense to Odell Beckham. But his name is well known anyway. Verdict, overrated. Lemurs are us. High school. I feel it is essential for most, but tends to become more of a chore rather than a place of learning. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Well, everybody's high school experience is different. For me, it was fucking terrible. The only thing I actually enjoyed was playing football. Looking back, honestly, I used very little of the shit I was forced to learn then in my life now. Seriously, fuck geometry and especially proofs. They don't teach you to do anything like taxes or how to balance a checkbook or anything about the stock market, etc. That shit is actually important and affects your life in a daily basis. Verdict, overrated. Moon Man, Andre Reed, one of the most underrated wide receivers in history, primarily because of the dominance of Jerry Rice in his era. Well, Reed was very good and he is in the Hall of Fame. His counting stats are impressive and he made 7 Pro Bowls for the early 90s Bills that made 4 Super Bowls, but upon further review, his legacy doesn't stand up quite as well. 4 of his 7 Pro Bowl nods came in years he didn't even reach 1,000 yards, and he was never named first team All-Pro. If he's in the Hall of Fame, then Anquan Boldin should be in the Hall of Fame. Verdict, overrated. Ray 006. Ed, and Eddy, my favorite Cartoon Network show as a kid. People think the show fell off when the kids went to school and summer ended, but I think the opposite. It's one of the few shows that got better as it went on. I love the show, and the thought of a giant jawbreaker always enters my mind whenever it's mentioned. It was just a fun show that made you forget about shit. There were no adults in it, which I enjoyed, and I liked how they never showed what was under Double D's hat, which hints that he's heavily deformed somehow. Also, the fan theory that they're all stuck in purgatory is very interesting too. Verdict, underrated. 1 meter Skeeter. Ooh, wow. Hey, Barry, would love to hear your thoughts on the late, great Drazen Petrovic. Almost everyone on the Dream Team have said that Drazen was the only person who showed no fear towards any of them, and had his life not been cut short, he would have dominated the NBA more than he already had at that point. He was a phenomenal shooter, no offense to Clint Eastwood. Well, Drazen was an incredible shooter and a very good scorer, but he was pretty one-dimensional. He didn't grab many rebounds, generate assists, or defend much. I do think because he died young and way before his time, people tend to overstate how good he was just a bit. He was an all-star caliber player, but not on the level of the all-time greats, at least in his NBA career. Could he have become that? We'll never know, sadly. Verdict, overrated. Xander Gooden. Mace Windu. I hear lots of chatter about how great of a Jedi Master he was, yet he choked when it mattered most. Quote-unquote, eye test means nothing when you don't have the hardware to back it up. Love your videos, Barry. Thank you. Well, I disagree that Windu didn't come through when it mattered most. He was about to kill Palpatine, who had just cut through 3 other Jedi Masters like cake, until that whiny, pussy-whipped bitch Anakin came in and betrayed him. He also gave General Grievous his famous cough by crushing his insides with the Force. That's fucking awesome. He also decapitated Jango Fett like a boss. He was legit. Verdict, properly rated. Gore Fiend. Vernon Davis, easily one of the best tight ends in the league during his prime, but I feel like he was forgotten as soon as he left San Francisco. He is a tricky one. He was a good tight end and also a bit of an underachiever at the same time, considering his godly athleticism. He never seemed to ever play up to his freakish speed, size, and strength combination, but he still finished with over 7,500 yards, 63 touchdowns, and Super Bowl ring, so you can't say his career was fruitless, but he did have the the talent to be as good as Gronk or Kelsey. Verdict, properly rated. Tom Richards, Luke Kuechly, one of my favorite players from my favorite teams, 2003 Defensive Player of the Year, 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, and one of the best at his position while he was in the league, but like Andrew Luck, decided to hang it up early. Would love to hear your opinion on him. Keep up the great work, brother. Thank you. I mean, I really can't say anything about Kuechly that hasn't already been said many times. He was obviously incredible, and he was very smart and tenacious. He was also an extremely hard worker who made a lot of money in his short career, so he's an absolute catch for anybody's daughter. If I had a daughter who was Luke's age, early 30s or so, I would love for her to date him and have consensual sex with him. Verdict, properly rated. Eisen, Matt Hasselbeck. He was my favorite player growing up and helped Seattle get to a Super Bowl by handing the ball off to Sean Alexander, but no one seems to talk about him. Wondered what you thought of him. Yes, that's Hasselbeck with hair. Not a bad looking dude actually, kind of looks a little bit like Chris Evans. Mr. August, as they called him, was a very good quarterback for about 4 to 5 years in the mid-2000s. He made 3 Pro Bowls, took a team to the Super Bowl as you mentioned, and finished with almost 37,000 passing yards and over 200 touchdown passes. He also had the famous upset over New Orleans in the 2010 playoffs. Had Seattle won that Super Bowl and Russell Wilson didn't break all of his franchise records, he would be remembered much more fondly today. Verdict, underrated. Corbin, A.J. McCarron in college. Severely underrated for being a quote-unquote game manager when in reality he was second in Heisman voting in 2013, one of the winningest quarterbacks in college history. I'm gonna keep it real with you, Chief. I really don't give a fuck about this Bama system quarterback who sucked in the NFL. His wife, however, well, I can understand where Brent Musburger was coming from. Also, his mom is a MILF. Watch out for Zach Wilson, AJ. Verdict, titties. IDK everything. Dora the Explorer. Truly one of the icons of television that many children have watched for generations. Love your content, Barry. Dora always came across as a pretentious bitch to me. A snotty know-it-all. Oh, look at me, I'm Dora, and I have a talking monkey named Boots. I'm so cool, and I speak multiple languages. She also treated Swiper the Fox like shit. Hey, Dora, maybe instead of yelling at Swiper all the time, you could try to ask him what's wrong instead, you bitch. Verdict, overrated. Derek Mercer, Jamal Crawford, 6th man of the decade if you ask me. It was always a pleasure to watch him convert 4-point plays. To me, Crawford was the NBA equivalent of fast food. He'd always have exciting handles and occasionally make some nice 4-point plays, as you said. But in the big picture, the more you relied on him, the worse your team got. He was never a player who had a game that was conducive to winning, which is why his teams usually didn't keep him around very long. Verdict, overrated. Nomad_SM. The color purple, the actual color, not the movie. I honestly think it's one of the best colors, but people never talk about it. I've honestly never thought about colors in debates before, but yeah, the color purple is cool, I guess. It represented royalty in the old days. Personally, I would put it behind colors like blue and red, but it's above yellow and green. Verdict, properly rated. Loaf of Bread 14. Nirvana, one of the best bands of all time in my opinion, but a lot of people say they suck. Also, great video, keep them coming please. Nirvana was a great band, and Kurt Cobain was a great frontman, but much like athletes or other singers who die young, people tend to overrate them historically, but Nirvana was legit even if they released just 3 studio albums. Cobain was so fucked up all the time that even if he had lived, the band probably wouldn't have lasted much longer anyway. At least Kurt went out with a bang though. Verdict, properly rated. Currently rebranding. Power Levels and DBZ. I heard they are pointless, but I want to hear your godly thoughts on the matter. Well, to me, as a diehard Dragon Ball Z fan, Power Levels really started to jump the shark once they started letting kids turn into Super Saiyans in the Buu saga. The power levels in Dragon Ball Super are just hilarious at this point. I think there's now like 14 forms of Super Saiyan. I miss the days when Goku turned Super Saiyan on Namek and Gohan turned Super Saiyan 2 versus Cell. It actually meant something back then, goddammit. Verdict, overrated. John Smith, Giraffes. They're my favorite animal to see at the zoo, and I feel like they're a bit underappreciated when it comes to popular zoo animals, so wanted to get your take on it. I disagree. I don't think giraffes are underrated at all. These assholes enjoy sticking their necks into people's faces literally and figuratively and making a scene about it. Like, okay, douchebag, we get it. Your neck is really long. Congrats, douche. Verdict, overrated. Skag Guy 4014. Chuck Norris. I personally love Walker, Texas Ranger, despite his cheesiness. His quote-unquote facts are some of the funniest jokes I've heard, and he's just overall a badass. Would love to hear your take. Thank you for the amazing content and always making me laugh on Tuesdays. Also, thank you for supporting the troops. Well, you're surely welcome. Chuck Norris jokes were hilarious back in the day and definitely not overrated, although now they've been copied into oblivion. As for Norris himself, I give him bonus points for his dodgeball cameo and fighting skills, although as an actor, he's really just not very good at all. His real name is Carlos, which a lot of people might not know. If you're a Michael Myers fan, check out his movie Silent Rage. You're welcome. Verdict, properly rated. David Pearson. Tiger Woods. In my opinion, he saved the game of golf and is considered by many, including myself, to be one of the best athletes of all time, but I would love to hear your thoughts on him. Love the channel, Barry. No athlete in my lifetime means more to their sport than Tiger Woods. He makes golf relevant on a national scale single-handedly. That being said, 15 years ago, it looked like he was going to destroy every record there was, and because of his addiction to pussy and some car accidents, he won't reach Jack Nicklaus's record, which is disappointing. Still, his run during his peak will never be seen again, even if he might have underachieved slightly in totality. Verdict, properly rated. Aladdis 11. Candyman, specifically the first movie. For me, the movie score and Candyman as a character make the first movie a classic. Sad it's not talked about enough. Well, I haven't seen any of the sequels or the remake by Jordan Peele, but I have seen the original, and I absolutely love it. It has an unsettling vibe, and the cinematography is great. Candyman himself, played by Tony Todd, is really badass with his bloody hook, and the way they make you feel for the hot blonde chick with big jugs for being wrongly framed for some murders is excellent. Then having her come back and killing her cheating boyfriend at the end is great too. Verdict, underrated. Danielle Fox. Pistol Pete Maravich, arguably the greatest college basketball player ever, and he was a pioneer in the art of acrobatic passing, but injuries ruined his career and he never won anything important. I think he's often overlooked, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Keep up the great work. Pistol Pete is every racist white guy who hasn't watched the NBA since the 70s favorite player. He was a fun and exciting player who, as you said, never won anything and wasn't that efficient, although he did play without the three-point line. If he did play today, he would be decried as a stat patter and a showboat who can't win instead of a legend like he actually is now. Very, very talented, but also very overhyped. Verdict, overrated. Retro Jasper. David Thompson. I think some people forget how good he actually was when he played. He is truly one of a kind. I am not overrating him, just saying he's a special player. Well, he was a freak athlete and a special talent who was one of the best players in the late 1970s. So when he was in the right state of mind, he was not overrated, but he got caught up in drugs, got hurt, and had a very disappointing pro career overall. So nowadays, when people wax poetic about him as an NBA legend, he does get overrated. Unless they're talking about his college career, which was truly legendary. Although, since we're talking about his pro career, overrated. Dan Teat? I don't know. I'm gonna just go with it, alright? Bob Cousy, he's an all-time Celtics legend who was one of the first few superstars in the NBA. His handles were impressive for the time. Could his handles and abilities help him adapt to the current game of dominant guard play? Cousy, at best, would be a bench warmer in today's NBA, if he'd make it at all. He had terrible shooting splits and wasn't a great athlete. Think of it like this. Cousy is like Sarah J. If she was coming up in the industry today, she wouldn't stand a chance since she looks like Chet Holmgren. But she's still a legend of the game because she accomplished so much during the time she came up in. Same logic applies to Cousy and the NBA. Verdict, properly rated. Sebastian Giamatti. Rich Gannon. Guy was an MVP winner and seems to get almost no press when talking about some of the great quarterbacks of the 90s, early 2000s. I've been thinking about Gannon a lot lately, not in a sexual way of course, but because Geno Smith's resurgence out of nowhere got me thinking about how Gannon didn't break out as an elite quarterback until his 13th NFL season. From 1987 to 1998, he was a mediocre starter and backup, and then from 1999 to 2002, he made 4 straight Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pros, and 1 2002 MVP. He will always be most remembered for throwing 5 interceptions versus Tampa in the Super Bowl, though, and that's just how life goes. Verdict, properly rated. Man Dude 123 Go. Inside the NBA on TNT. They are usually regarded, including me as well, as one of the best sports broadcasts of all time. They are very engaging and fun to listen to. It's okay, I'm not as into it as a lot of other people. I think it was a lot funnier before Shaq got there, as he really kills the mood a lot of the time with his insecurity about dumb shit. But overall, I can't say it's overrated since some of the stuff they do is pretty funny. Verdict, properly rated. Isaac Wojo. Charles Tillman. He consistently held his own against great receivers like Moss and Megatron, but has been mostly forgotten by people who aren't Chicago fans. Well, he was a very good player. He finished with 38 picks and 44 forced fumbles, which is an insane total for a defensive back. But like pretty much every other good to great Bears defender in history, his teams were always held back by shitty offenses, so he never won a ring. He's actually an FBI agent now, but when it comes to NFL players serving their country, he'll always be the second best Tillman after Pat. Verdict, properly rated. Vinny Cincata. Harry Potter, the character and the series as a whole. I never really gave a crap about Harry Potter, the character. He was always protected with plot armor and overall just pretty uninteresting. As for the series, I never became a diehard fan the way so many others my age did, but I have seen all the movies and I thought they were enjoyable for the most part. I like Snape's storyline especially, and Voldemort was pretty cool in the last few films. J.K. Rowling is also hot, which I was not expecting the first time I saw her. Emma Watson though, massively overrated looks-wise. Sorry. Verdict, properly rated. David McCright. Jeff Garcia, in my opinion, the 3rd greatest Niners quarterback ever, and then took the Eagles and Bucks to the playoffs, but seems to be forgotten by most. I would say he's the 4th best 49ers quarterback ever after John Brody, but I do feel like his run from 2000 to 2002 is forgotten about. As you said, he took my Eagles to the playoffs in 2006 and the Bucks to the playoffs in 2007. He was a good quarterback who could run. Like Kurt Warner, he got a late start to his NFL career, but unlike Warner, he doesn't have a ring, he doesn't have any MVPs or Super Bowl appearances, so he gets easily overlooked. Verdict, underrated. Ashvin Veradajaru, hope I said that right. College. I honestly feel like college is just another waste of at least 4 more years at school, which is always super expensive, constant homework assignments, tests, projects, quizzes, etc. And on top of that, having to work a minimum wage job, most likely just to pay off the student loans. I also want to add that it increases obesity for the students because they never have time to eat fresh foods and only have to eat processed foods combined with everything I just mentioned before. But what do you think about college overall? By the way, Barry, I love your content. Keep it up. You always get me to get a good laugh or chuckle with your jokes. Well, I'm glad I can help out. From an academic standpoint, college was completely useless for me. I didn't give a single fuck about any major or any topics, so I basically coasted through my 4 years. But from a social standpoint, college was absolutely not overrated. I had no social life all the way through high school, but I had the best times of my life in college on Friday and Saturday nights. It's unfortunate they don't have a YouTube major, or else I could have started this channel a lot earlier. In the end, it all balances out. Verdict: properly rated. Duck. How about Vince Lombardi? Definitely one of the greatest to ever do it, but I've seen people putting him in the single greatest ever, and I just wanted to know your opinion on him. Look, I don't know if Vince Lombardi is the best head coach ever, but he definitely has an argument for it, considering he turned the Packers around and made them into an unstoppable juggernaut, and then the moment he left, they went back to being shit until the early 90s when Favre arrived. He even gave Washington their first winning season in almost 15 years during his 1 year there before his death. 5 titles in 10 years, never a losing season, a 9-1 playoff record. That's legit. Verdict: properly rated. Noah Veek. Carson Palmer. He's in the top 15 all-time throwing yards, but never gets brought up. Like a lot of other NFL players I've talked about, Palmer had some great years, a few good ones, and a lot of meh ones. His 2005 and 2015 seasons were MVP worthy, but he never really seemed to sustain a great level of play for long. He was prone to turnovers, had some major injuries, and his teams never won anything until his late 30s, and even then he got blown out in his only NFC Championship game. He was a good quarterback, but there's a reason nobody talks about him as a Hall of Famer. Verdict: properly rated. Nathan Bates. Alex Smith gets due credit for coming back from his horrific leg injury and cheating death, but I feel like not many people pay him credit for being what I think a very solid quarterback. Well, you're right, Smith deserves credit for coming back from his leg injury and also resurrecting his career from draft bust to respectable starter, but that's all he ever really became. He was a quarterback who was always good enough to not lose you games, but he also couldn't go win a game, and that's why multiple teams decided to dump him. It would be interesting to see how the Patriots would have done from 2011 to 2017 if you replaced Brady with Smith in those years, though. Verdict: properly rated. West Dog. Jimi Hendrix, revered by some as the greatest guitarist of all time. What are your thoughts? Well, like you said, he's widely considered the best guitar player ever, even though he only made 3 albums and died at 27. Much like with Kurt Cobain and other members of the 27 Club, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, and Janis Joplin, people tend to slightly overrate them because they died before their time. Hendrix, no doubt, was a great guitar player, and I enjoy some of his songs like Hey Joe, but I don't consider him one of my favorite musicians. Verdict: overrated. Soren Halvorsen. Queen Elizabeth sadly passed away prematurely, so who knows how much she could have impacted the sport of royalty. Some consider her a system queen with flaws in her game, but I see her as a great talent whose potential will never be fully seen due to the extremely early death. Sad face emoji. I completely agree with everything you said. The Big E died well before she really had any chance to make an impact on the world. But despite her premature death at the age of 96, she still accomplished many things and sired many respectable children, like Prince Andrew. I can't talk about this anymore, it's too emotional for me. Verdict: you chatting shit, bro? Nathan. Count Dooku. I think he's underrated because he took Obi-Wan and Anakin at the same time, pause, and they only lived because Yoda saved them. And then later he died, but only because Palpatine wanted him to. He has more movie time than Darth Maul. Imagine how many lives would have been spared had Obi-Wan not been a stubborn bitch and actually listened to Dooku in episode 2. He literally gave away Sidious's plot. Christopher Lee was really badass, and his curved lightsaber owned as well. My only fault with Dooku is that he should have spilled the beans on Palps in episode 3 when Palps turned on him once Anakin had him defeated. Dooku really lost his head that day. Verdict: underrated. Beck. Bruce Smith, the all-time sack leader, but is hardly talked about when talking about great pass rushers. Thanks for respecting women so much. Well, I wouldn't say Smith is hardly talked about when great pass rushers come up, but he's usually put after guys like Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White, and rightfully so, I believe. I do think his longevity is extremely impressive. He was just an incredible football player who deserves all the praise he gets. Verdict: properly rated. Bye man, baby man. Boneless wings. Some people got problems with them, but overall they are pretty good. What do you think? I've had boneless wings a few times and they were okay, but there's something about bone wings that make it mean more. If you order boneless wings in front of me, I'm kind of gonna think you're a little bit of a bitch. You're supposed to get your hands greasy and shit when eating wings. You're supposed to earn that meat. Pause. As my wife tells her boyfriend every night, give me the bone. Verdict: overrated. Not So Short King. Candy corn. It's a staple of Halloween, but honestly, I think it's disgusting. Love the videos, Barry. I absolutely love candy corn, and any person who attacks candy corn, well, I take that as an attack on me and what I stand for. So if you diss candy corn in front of me, I'm gonna sock you and you're gonna hit the ground hard. I could eat that shit all day, even though it makes my man boobs bigger. Verdict, underrated. Red Temper. My Bloody Valentine, 1981 Canadian classic. I want to know your take. I feel like it was underrated because it got out of the spotlight with all the other horror classics. The original My Bloody Valentine was a decent film. I wouldn't consider it great, but I gotta say, I have never seen a movie with more ugly people in it. I'm dead serious. I don't think there was even one attractive person in this film. If that's what the directors were going for, they absolutely nailed it. The remake was pretty bad too, but at least it had some hot women to look at. Verdict, overrated. Jake Bash, The Sopranos. It's one of the greatest and most influential TV shows of all time and pioneered the concept of the anti-hero in TV. Also, Tony is a class act and role model. I agree. Just an absolutely legendary show with a lead character in Tony Soprano who was varsity athlete caliber, faithful to his wife, never killed or hurt anybody, was unafraid to go to therapy, and had classy friends like Silvio Dante and Paulie Walnuts. The only thing I have an issue with about the show is how the finale ended prematurely and out of no...